recording. Thank you. Stop. Okay.
Welcome to Kozversations, where your host, Carl Kozlowski, talks with the world's most interesting people. And now, this week's Kozversation.
Greetings, Earthlings. Welcome to another edition of Kozversations, coming to you from Radio Titan Studios in Los Angeles. And as always, we bring you the greatest and most interesting people from the worlds of pop culture, politics, and beyond. And today is one of those beyond people. He's somebody I've had a couple years back when we were in our Hollywood days. One of the most popular and influential pastors in America, probably the leading progressive voice, I'd say, in American Christianity, at least in my opinion. And for 21 years, the Reverend Ed Bacon has presided over All Saints Church in Pasadena as its rector, and he led the charge on all sorts of social and religious issues, including same-sex marriage, battling the IRS over the right to free speech at the pulpit, protesting the death penalty, and U.S. policy in the Middle East. But he stepped down last year into semi-retirement and moved back to his beloved South. He was a Georgia native and now lives in the Birmingham, Alabama area. And he recently returned to All Saints for the first time in a year and a half to give a stirring sermon last Sunday. And today he's coming to us from a stop in Little Rock, Arkansas, where he's being honored in a very special ceremony. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Ed Bacon. How you doing?
Hey, Carl, it's great to hear from you. Thank you for that introduction. Amazingly accurate. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, basically accurate. Yeah, I kind of botched a photo credit this week, folks. So I described somebody as Bishop Desmond Tutu, and it was somebody completely different, and I should have known better. Anyways, so yes, amazingly accurate is the word. So, tell us what's going on in Little Rock there. It sounds like a pretty interesting honor you got there.
It's just amazing. It came out of my blind side. I didn't know about this particular faith community. It's called the Open Door Community Church. And every year, Peggy Campolo, who happens to be married to Tony Campolo, one of the great evangelical leaders, comes and gives an award called the Carrier Pigeon Award. Carrier Pigeon between those who are vulnerable to those who are misinformed. And she's talking about particularly LGBTQ people who are really marginalized and vulnerable, and carrying information about their real life to the misinformed, i.e. Conservative evangelicals who are not for inclusion. And so they heard about me, read my book, 8 Habits of Love, and are recognizing my work tonight and tomorrow. So I'm here to receive this award and make 2 speeches. And I'm very excited about it, I must say. Very moved by it.
That's great, man. So down in Alabama now, you are working as, you like to describe it as a freelance priest with some of the biggest nonprofit groups in the country, like the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, and NAACP Equal Justice. So what has your life been like as you've been taking on all these groups, or be working with all these groups?
Well, it's really wonderful. And as you said in your intro, I live in my beloved South. I really do love the South. Most of my family members are here. Mostly in Georgia and North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I feel a real call to bring the good news of what I've learned over the course of my professional life about love and grace, inclusion, and justice for all to red state environments.
Yeah, no
kidding. And so that's what it's about. It's about teaming up with helping to be a part of the coalition that is already here and that is developing between justice-oriented people to give energy to that, and also to give theological rooting, because too often bigotry masquerades as Christianity here. And all of us know that that is a hijacking of Jesus and the message of the good news, and also of the Hebrew prophets. And so to say that is not the truth. That is not who God is. That is not who Jesus is. That is not what Christianity truly is, I think is really, really important. And so what I do is I lend a voice and a lot of my all of my energy to that. So I spend, about half my time speaking in Southern circumstances like this weekend and from Sunday to Sunday. And then the rest of my time, I'm out traveling from Vancouver to Jamaica, Seattle, Minnesota, talking about love and the power it has to cast fear out of your life.
Wow, that's great. So, what would you say, like the phrase where you were saying bigotry has hijacked Christianity in so many of these places? That's something that really, I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, where you're at right now, which is why I was so fascinated that you're there. But
yeah,
it's like I was raised and am Catholic, but although I do visit All Saints sometimes, and so and we're more conservative as Catholics than Episcopals are, but we're still considered somewhat more on the open-minded end of the spectrum, probably compared to others. But I'm just wondering, like, what do you think it is that drives this? Because, for example, let's say the gay rights and gay marriage. I mean, if you look at a study Bible that breaks down by subject, Jesus himself never says one word about homosexuality, good or bad. And yet people drive it as this massive issue that when it's really doesn't even show up on his radar.
You're absolutely right. It was simply not one of Jesus' concerns. Jesus had much, much more concern about economic injustice, for instance, and about how those of us who are rich in global terms oppress those who are poor. Mm-hmm. The answer to your question, Carl, what is going on here? What is the root of all of this? It has to do with slavery. Mm. Slavery is not over. It has morphed into some horrible institutional racism, and there's no better voice on this than Brian Stevenson at Equal Justice Initiative and all of the wonderful champions of fairness and justice at the Southern Poverty Law Center, both in Montgomery. And also, in order to justify slavery, the business, the actual business of owning other human beings, there was developed a horrendous perversion of Christianity and theology. And the real name for it is white supremacist theology. And what it does, in addition to saying some very distorted things about God and Jesus, that God is a white male up there and out there, that you can get to do your bidding if you do the right thing, and that Jesus is a sacrifice for your sins to calm down God's anger. In addition to that distortion, then there is this social hierarchy that is developed that says white, straight males are the most valuable of God's creation, and everybody else is inferior in value, in intrinsic value. It is nauseatingly perverted. And part of that is a discrimination against people of color and a discrimination against LGBTQ people, and certainly a discrimination against women. Women, people of color, and LGBTQ people are inferior, intrinsically inferior to white, straight males, according to this ideology. It doesn't even deserve the name theology. It's an ideology, and it persists this time. I was on an advisory council for the Muslim Public Affairs Committee last weekend when I was in Los Angeles, and my friend, civil rights attorney Connie Rice, said, the Civil War is not over. We are still fighting the Civil War, and all of the cultural wars that we have in America, not just in the South, but in America, can be traced back to the Civil War. and the absence of its conclusion.
Wow. Okay. So then one other thing that is going on that I think would be, I was curious to see if you have an opinion about it. Kind of a different take or direction is, do you have any thoughts since you talk about the war on how women are being affected? What about all the stuff going on in Hollywood right now and show business, the power dynamics that are being exposed, the abuses going on? Do you have any thoughts on that stuff, or is that outside your sphere?
No, I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings. It fits into this ideology that men have the right to use women for the men's pleasure, and that women don't have any right to say anything to stop that. And what is being exposed, not only in Hollywood, of course, but in political realm, business, the media, even NPR, is simply revealing what's been going on. And people of conscience are speaking up and are making it safe for women who have been victimized to come forward. And so I'm feeling very, very hopeful about this moment in our cultural history that we are going to come to terms with, and in large part atone for the oppression of women in America.
Okay. So then one other thing that, that we talked about recently was that you're dealing a lot with issues of race down there in the South. And so with all the things that are going on, how are things there compared to the rest of the country? The stereotype is that, maybe they're more backwards, but then I've heard over the years, and I experienced sometimes, that in the South, people are sometimes better off with each other because they've been forced to address it in that part of the country.
Well, it's pluses and minuses. You're talking about the pluses there.
Yeah.
The advantages are that the civil rights victories against legal segregation were real. There are many, many more interracial couples in restaurants, public places, than I knew when I was a boy growing up here in the South, and a lot more real interracial friendships going on. And there are many, many, many more people of color in the workplace. Now, without diminishing any of the importance of that as a victory, there is still institutional racism and a lot of de facto segregation in terms of neighborhoods, in terms of school systems. The private school system is a reality. And at the same time, there are wonderful things going on in the public school system. My daughter and her husband are both public school teachers. And my wife and I get to go to an awful lot of wonderful experiences in terms of sports and the arts. And it's totally integrated of whites and blacks. And on the other side, this is just a both and thing. On the other side, there is the prison, the school to prison pipeline. There is a horrible record in terms of mass incarceration of people of color, mostly people of color. And the death penalty is a racist institution. Most people who receive the death penalty are people of color. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we've got a lot of relationships to build on it. The way I think about it, Carl, is the personal and interpersonal doing much, much better. The institutional and cultural has a much farther way to go, a longer way to go.
Okay. So then, what would you say, is there any specific things about how Charlottesville went down, and things they're seeing in the White House that a president would dare say, there's good people on both sides after that kind of shocking display,
Well, the